our mothers, no matter how good or bad or whatever they are,
In between, yeah.
they're all just doing their best.
Absolutely.
My mum, with the resources they have.
Mm-hmm.
Hi everyone, welcome to No Place Like Home. I am Jess and I'm here with Larissa.
Hello.
And today we're going to talk about the mother wound.
Juicy.
Juicy.
Nice. Yeah.
So just to be clear to anyone who's listening, when we talk about the mother wound, we also have a few episodes back where we talk about the sister wound.
Yes.
And so like the sister wound, the mother wound is a metaphorical wound. It's not a physical wound.
What is the mother wound?
Well, yeah, it's the conditioning that's passed down to us from our mothers, and it all is rooted in, like, I feel like when a lot of people, when they become a mother, you know, we're all wounded in some way or another. Some of us have a lot of healing to do. Others have done a lot of healing and still have a lot to do, but everyone's in different states of repair and hurt. And so often when we become mothers, this is all amplified. And
because we replicate that sort of blueprint and unconscious programming that we've grown up in. We're a function of our environment.
Yeah. And, so a lot of people, there's that, I think anecdotally, a really good way to explain what the mother wound is when you're struggling and your mother or your mother-in-law is like, well, I raised 6 kids on my own.
Do you know how many women even talk to me about that now, and they say, I want to come and stay at home and I would love to, be cared for like that. But my mum or my auntie will be like, what do you need to go and stay there for?
Yeah, and they judge you for it. And
I raised 6 kids and
and I had no help. And
your father was at work.
And the thing is, I think the reason, I feel like there's not only 2 types of mothers, but there's 2 ends of the spectrum. There's the mothers who are so supportive, who want you to have every opportunity possible and can see how wonderful something like a postpartum doula, a meal train, staying at home can be. And then there's the other people who had nothing. They weren't supported in their postpartums and they feel resentment towards us. And I think a lot of the mother wound stems from resentment in our mothers. And because they didn't get the opportunities that we now have, they, instead of being happy for us, they don't know how to be happy for us. And it's not their fault because they've got their own stuff that they need to work through. And so it manifests in this belittling, keeping you small, really not supporting you or questioning your struggles or, and it's not nice.
Yeah, no, it's not. How do these behaviours and feelings, how do they literally show up? What do you think are some examples of how?
Well, I mean, what we just talked about, the person that said to you that their mother would judge them if they stayed at home. I mean, and there's also,
I suppose there's quintessential phrases as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
Or I'm trying to think back and, I don't think my mother ever said this to me, but it was certainly a feeling and it could have been my own thing. But, I think those sorts of I need to do, this is how I need to show up.
Yeah.
This is how I need to be because my mum raised 2 daughters on her own. I think my sister was 3 when my dad left and I was 8 or 9. And, so I felt that, I think that pressure to be well, mum did this,
You have to be a good girl and stay in line because your mum's doing so much and working so hard and you can't complain. You just have to head down, bum up, get on with it.
Yeah.
So we keep ourselves small to keep our mothers happy.
I do that a lot.
A lot of people really hide their own, dreams and hopes and wishes and expectations because they know that their mother is going to judge them for it.
Yeah.
There's also the other side is that a lot of mothers live vicariously through their children, you know, and so a lot of people feel like they have to do what their mum wants them to do. And even if it is in a supposedly supportive environment, there's still that feeling of not being able to be who you want to be because you feel like you need to be the person that your mother wants you to be.
How do you feel like yours showed up?
Oh my gosh, well...
Should we go there? Because both our mums listen to this.
Yeah, I actually don't know if my mum listens. Her friends do. So my mum was 15 when she got pregnant with me.
Wow.
16 when she had me.
Wow.
Single mum. She lived with my grandparents for a little while and then she moved down the road and was living on her own in a tiny freezing cold house with no one, no help, no support. All of her friends were at school. She got kicked out of school for being pregnant. And it's tricky because we really did grow up together. Like when I moved out of home at 17, she was 34.
Wow.
So, you know, I have 34-year-old friends who don't even have kids yet and want to have kids one day. And meanwhile, my mum, her kid had left home at that age. And my mum's really supportive and wonderful with all things birth and postpartum. She's always supported my choices. She's always said that, you know, she's always said how lucky we are to live in a time where we've got Instagram and we can talk to a friend on the other side of the world, or we can look up breastfeeding issues, and we have the internet, we have iPhones, we have social media, and she talks about how lucky we are to have that, but she never ever says it in a resentful way, and I really take my hat off to her for that. But there's also, I think, a subconscious resentment on her part for how amazing my life has been. And yeah, sometimes she's just a real bitch.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like I can be my like ding, 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 like shiny, bright self. It's too much for her. When I'm like my shiniest, brightest, like shine bright like a diamond Jess, I'm too much for her. And so she pushes me down.
Okay.
My whole life I've been pushed down. Yeah, so that's
a lot, yeah.
It's a lot.
Like, that's big.
But I also, you know, I mean, I always come back to, and, you know, because it's important, like we have to do the work here to heal this. Like we can, a lot of people say that their mothers are their biggest triggers, and especially even if you had a really wonderful relationship with your mum before you became pregnant, often when we become pregnant, it's our mums, our mother-in-laws and our just family in general that trigger us. My mother-in-law is amazing. She's been so supportive. She's never, ever, ever questioned anything I've done. She's never said a bad word to me about my parenting, the state of my house. I always apologize if my house is a mess when she comes over, and she's like, it's fine. What are you talking about? You know, she would never make me feel bad for anything. She's a saint. But I know a lot of people don't have that. I feel like I'm going to cry talking about my mother-in-law. She's so great. We should get her on the podcast.
Why not? That's a good idea, actually. We should get someone on of that generation to get their thought. That's great, actually.
To talk about, you know.
Rach, producer, let's do that, right?
So,
what's your relationship like now with your mum?
Oh, it's good.
Yeah.
It's good, but it's still fraught with tension. Like we need an ocean between us.
Yeah, okay. I was going to say, because your mum's in New Zealand,
my mum's
right?
in New Zealand.
Yeah.
So we talk a lot. Like sometimes we talk every day, and then we'll talk a few times a week, just depending on where we're at and what exciting projects we want to talk about with each other. But when we're together, it's tricky. And as Andy has said to me, he's like, I see my family for 3 hours and I start to get triggered by them. You don't see your mum for 6 months and then she comes to stay with you for a week. Like, it's a big adjustment to just suddenly have someone in your space, but we just start to get on each other's nerves.
But I think anyone would with that distance and then
boom, here you are.
And then I think that would be.
Yeah. So we fight. Almost every time we see each other, we have a fight. There were a couple of periods for a while there where I was really like, I had to work so hard to not respond to her little snide, catty remarks. And they're never about my mothering. They're always about other things, those remarks that she makes. And so the last time, though, I saw her, we were in the Gold Coast together, and look, the whole family got COVID. It was a fraught time. But we had a big
not
one.
Ideal.
We had a big blow up. And she basically said to me, you need therapy. And I was like, no shit, Mum. And then she said, I'm never going to be the mother you want me to be.
Oh.
And I was like, so, you know, there's I think we all have a responsibility, like you, me, everyone listening to this podcast, to remember that our mothers, no matter how good or bad or whatever they are,
In between, yeah.
they're all just doing their best.
Absolutely.
My mum, with the resources they have. Mm-hmm. My mum didn't have the internet. Neither did yours, you know. We can't expect them to do the healing that we want them to do. We just have to do it ourselves and find a place where we can just know that they did the best they could with what they've got or with what they had, and that
we have to establish those gentle boundaries.
Yeah, and we have to be the ones to be the change, because they're also dealing with what their own mothers did and said. And,
this is a generational thing.
Yeah, and so it's very rare to come across someone who's a completely healed and enlightened person.
I don't think anyone is.
No.
I know when I first sort of got, into spirituality, and, you always kind of go through this dark period and you inevitably find something that helps you get out of it. But like that was one thing. I think I was always on this quest for like full healing and, full like I'm just going to be free of all of this trauma and heartache, but there's always something.
Often when
you're never going to
healing,
get to that,
you find more wounds.
Yeah,
like you heal the most visible or consuming
relevant,
ones, the most relevant ones,
things.
and then you uncover a whole lot of other stuff that needs healing.
Yeah, but I don't think like there's nothing broken about that, right?
No.
I actually think that there's as much as, don't get me wrong, I have been through some harrowing ceremonies where I'm like screaming my head off.
Oh yeah, you've told me.
Right?
Yep.
But there's also this like beauty in releasing all of that, right? And, there's a relationship that I needed to better with my mother for myself, but more so I hold my children in that honour of me working through all my stuff so that they don't have to.
Well, yeah, this is the thing, right?
Yeah, deal with the mother wound.
Yeah, and often that's the catalyst. So becoming a mother and just being so in love with these tiny little humans, it's the catalyst for us to do the deep healing work that we need to do. My mum also had a hot temper. So she would explosive temper.
Too. Yeah.
And I didn't know until I'd moved out of home that wasn't normal.
Yeah.
And so I've been working on myself basically since then to not be explosive and to not have that rage. And I was really worried about when I became a mother about being the angry mum. I really didn't want to be an angry mum, and I didn't want to have a short fuse. And what I found in becoming a mum is I actually become a lot more patient, way more patient than I thought I would be, except for that occasional time. Usually it's physical, like if one of my kids hurts me physically and I'll just explode. Yeah. But it's not a day-to-day explosiveness. No. It's probably once a month. Funny that.
Around a certain time?
Around a certain time.
I was the angry mum. I was just angry all the time. And that mother's rage for me, which I think we'll probably talk about. We will definitely
do an episode on it, yeah.
That was real for me.
Yeah.
That was really real. But that wasn't, I was angry at a lot of things.
So, I mean, you had such a rough start.
Yeah. And then
surprising.
It all just came out with that first pregnancy and dealing with that. I feel like all of that anger just came to the surface, and I was like, I don't even know who I am, which obviously greatly contributed to my postnatal depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
And that like identity shift was, times 1,000, because I was like, where is this anger coming from? I don't understand. But, you know, my mum was really angry growing up because, you know.
I mean, of course she was.
My father, well, in hindsight, my father was seeing someone else and, you know, so she had all of her stuff going on, right? But I grew up in that environment. So it was loud and angry and, you know, so that sort of morphed into mine and that was like, oh, this is how I express myself. But yeah, I understand that whole sort of mother wound. Is this a thing for sons? Like do partners experience this? So men and their...
Yeah, well, I think...
Do we call it a father wound? I don't know.
Well, there's definitely a father wound. That's a whole other... That's daddy issues. Yes, so sons. Often mums coddle their sons and these boys grow up to expect that all of their physical, emotional, all of their needs are fulfilled by the woman that they're closest to, so their mother. And so then when they... This is assuming they're, you know, going to end up with a woman. But when they start living with a girlfriend or a wife or whoever it is, a partner, they just expect their partner to fulfill all of their needs. And they're not, you know, they're not going to therapy. They don't know how to do a load of laundry. They don't know how to pick up after themselves or regulate their emotions. And that's all because the mother has coddled them. I actually worry that I'm doing that to my own kids.
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. They're not super independent and we do everything for them.
Yeah, see, I was the opposite. We are really yin and yang. Yeah. So I was the opposite. I was like, Valentina, do tummy time for an extra 5 minutes. You need to be able to do tummy time.
My kids are like, I don't like tummy time. And I was like, it's okay. You don't have to do it.
I was the complete opposite, the poor darling. She was like bench pressing by the time she was 4.
It's really interesting actually because it's almost like, you know, so one of my stepdads, this is really sad and it might make me cry, but so I've had a couple of stepdads, but one of them, he's my brother's dad, so we still see him from time to time. I haven't seen him for years though actually, but I remember being like 20, 21, 25, maybe even 30, and he gave me a hard time for when I was 3 years old, banging on the bedroom door, wanting to be let out of the bedroom when it was bedtime.
All right.
And I was like, F you, how dare you, like, make me feel bad for something I did as a kid. Like as a kid who just had emotional needs that weren't being met. And he was like bullying, kind of like, oh, well, you, and I was just like, what a
yeah.
That's a whole, daddy issues, whoa. But I think because of that, I've gone the opposite way and I want to make sure my children's needs are always met. So it's like often we can swing from one. We either recreate or we repair, right? Like
it's hard. It's hard to find that balance between, and I don't think there ever is a perfect equilibrium of what that looks like.
And I often wonder, like, what are my kids going to need to go to therapy for? In what ways am I up my children?
Look, but to go back to what you said before, right? We're all doing the best we can.
We're all doing the best we can with the tools,
what we have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the greatest thing that we can offer ourselves is the awareness of what we're doing, right? So you know that you're like, I probably mollycoddle my kids too much. Or, you know, I'm like, my kids don't need to be running for president by the time they're 10. Like, you know, it's okay. They don't need to... You know, and we have that awareness. So, you know, I think
awareness
it's like
is
conscious
really
parenting, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
How are we reacting to their behaviours instead of telling them their behaviours are wrong?
Yeah. And then I guess something else that we should probably just touch on is boundary setting. So often, you know, it's tricky because it depends on what kind of mother you're dealing with or mother-in-law you're dealing with and what the wound is. And how it manifests in your relationship. But a lot of people feel really uncomfortable with boundary setting, and there's often this thought that a boundary is a barrier. Yeah. And it's not. It's a loving, it is a barrier, but it's not a gate closed
Yes.
type of barrier. It's I love you, but da-da-da-da-da. I love you, but you can't just drop in whenever you want to. Or I love you, but I don't want to have this conversation right now about whether you think my children should be going to daycare this young or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then you just have to leave it there. And then if they, often mothers will really poke at those boundaries and they'll try and bring up that topic we've said is out of bounds or bring up that thing that we've spoken about 100 times. And it's up to us to just keep that boundary in place and try and not be triggered. That is the biggest work right there, is trying not to be triggered by your mum. And then having someone to sort of, if you can then kind of get through that and then have someone, whether it's your therapist or a close friend or a partner, someone to sort of then download all of that on and,
But I think just getting through that situation, you've largely won.
Yeah.
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 In preserving yourself.
Yeah.
Because energetically, it's a huge exchange of energy.
Huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my goodness me. So we've touched on healing and having compassion for our mothers in, those situations. But is there anything practical? What are the practical things we can do to kind of get through that? I think if you're hearing about the mother wound for the first time and you're like, oh, that's why I do that, or like how obviously find a good therapist to help you work
if
through
you have
that.
the finances to do so.
Yeah.
Because even when you go on a mental health care plan, it's not even like it's a discount, a big rebate on
but it's still
like at least $100 out of pocket. And there's a reason I'm not in therapy right now, like a lot of people can't afford it. And then it's also, I think people think of therapy and they think of the money that it costs, but it's also the time off work, time to get to an appointment. I think one of the silver linings of COVID is that telehealth is now a big thing. And so you're not driving 20 minutes there and back to your therapist.
I do all of my psychology sessions on Zoom at home.
Yeah, it's great. It's great that that's an option now because a lot of people just are so time poor.
But it's convenient as well. Like my psychologist is literally just down the road. But I'm like, no,
I'm happy in my
stay
bed.
at home. So therapy is obviously one. I also depending on your relationship with your siblings, if you have any, I know my sister and I will chat a lot about, particularly if, we see mum getting a bit anxious and is in a bit of a state. I will often sit and chat with my sister about, how can we help mum through this or whatever it is. And, but we'll also talk about the underlying things about why she's doing this or why this behaviour is there or, and just how can we work out how to love upon her. And so having her really helps kind of
having
talk
that someone
through
who
a lot of
understands
things as
her
well. Yeah.
And I think another thing that's really important is just looking at the way we talk about ourselves, our sisters, our mothers in front of our children.
Yeah.
And so just not perpetuating or not making it okay to have that. I think that often that belittling and cattiness and bitching about each other behind each other's backs is so normalized that it just perpetuates.
Yes.
And if we can just, if I have something to say about my mum, I'm never going to say it in front of my kids. They don't need to hear that about their nana. And they also don't need to think that it's normal to say bad things about your family.
Other people. Yeah.
Obviously, it's important to be able to vent in a safe place. But I think they're too little to have to hear that.
Yeah.
So, I save it all for Andy.
Bless Andy.
Lucky Andy.
And it is, I mean, everyone can do what they want, but it is important to try and heal these wounds.
Yeah, it is important because then, that often it's holding us back.
Yes.
And so we want to be able to parent from our most, resourced and happy, enlightened selves to be able to do that, we need to do the inner healing work.
Yeah.
So, in life after birth, we do say get therapy before you become a parent, because often we all have things from our childhood that we want to leave behind and not bring into our children's childhood. And we have things that were wonderful about our childhood that we want to, recreate. Some people's mothers were absolute saints and they want to be just like them, and that's so beautiful.
It was like the conversation we had with Katie Parker. Remember how we had that conversation about the conversation that you should have before you have children or while you're pregnant about, well, how was I raised? What were mine? That's a conversation that all of this stuff could really come up in as well.
Yeah. And the thing is, sadly, a lot of us don't have that opportunity. Like, I wasn't planning my pregnancy. A lot of people aren't.
Yeah.
A lot of people are planning pregnancy, but it's, they don't have the finances to get therapy, or, especially if you're getting IVF or something like that. It's like, it's just you hemorrhaging money. The last thing you have money for is also getting therapy. And so because of that, a lot of people don't. Look, some people never seek out therapy. Other people don't realize they need it until they become parents. And then it's kind of like, oh, better do something about this.
Just want to touch back on what you were saying before. I actually think it is healthy to show our kids all spectrums of emotions.
I agree.
So, in our household, be it right or wrong, we talk about anger being anger is just...
It's a messenger.
It is, yeah. And anger is actually just a masking emotion for something else. So like, let's get it out. Let's have a pillow fight. Let's go and bash the bed. Let's go and scream in a pillow. Valentina loves screaming in a pillow.
Bless her.
But what it does is, she did it the other day and we were all just standing there around her, like just going, yep, just get it out, V, and Sebi was like literally cheering her on. But then it ends up in laughing, right? We all end up laughing and then she finds the capacity to be able to talk about it.
Yeah.
But, we as parents also I'm stressed at the moment, right? Building home, and there's a lot going on. So I have a range of emotions that are happening, but I'm consciously trying to be communicating them. So guys, I'm feeling really frustrated, and I get a cup and I go, this is where my cup is. And I'm like, it's either there's hardly any water in it, it's half full. Yeah. And I'm like, so I don't have much more to give. So how are we doing this?
Yeah.
What's tonight
and
looking
that's wonderful.
like?
That's...
but yeah, I think all spectrums of emotions
It's so important, because our kids need to also see healthy conflict resolution, right?
Yeah.
So Andy and I will have a little fight in front of the kids, and then what's hilarious is that now this is a real tangent from the mother wound, but if the kids are being real f***ers, and then Andy and I have a fight, they are they stop. They're just they become best friends again. Yeah. If they're fighting each other, especially, because then they'll be fighting each other and Andy will say something and I'm like, they're just children.
I know.
And then we fight and then the kids are like, ooh. But then, we also make up in front of them. And, as we've talked about in other episodes, apologizing, learning, knowing how to apologize for having a hot temper or for being cross or for whatever it is so important.
We were having a conversation before, our producer Rach and our beautiful guest Narelle, and we're having this conversation about how Sebastian last night, head lice are like my arch nemesis this year. I can't even tell you, right? Got them again.
Oh
so I literally, and I'm like a no chemical, no pharmaceutical type of vibe, right? I was like, we're bombing these things.
Yeah.
So I literally went and did it. Anyway, Sebi was not in the best mood and he dropped the F-bomb right in front of this poor girl that was doing his hair and all the rest of it. And I was like, oh my God. So by the time I got home, I was like, I'm done. I'm done. Valentina went and did her kumon, practiced her clarinet, did everything, because she was like, I'm not even going there with mum. I was like, great, we know. We're not even asking questions. We're just doing all the things. But then I felt bad because I was like, I'm just going to go and hang on the bed with you, because I was conscious, right? I was conscious of the vibe that was in the house, and I was like, I don't want to be that. I'm just going to go and breathe outside for literally a minute and go back in and oh my God, the mother wound. Wow.
Yeah. And I mean, look, we've only just touched on it. I feel like if we get if there's anyone that's a specialist in this, like a psychologist, it would be great to have them on to talk about it in more detail and give us some practical tips as to, I'm just riffing on bits that I've picked up, mostly on social media and podcasts.
But your own
it's
experiences as well.
It's a huge, personal experiences. Whew, big. Yeah.
Thanks, Jess. Thanks for going through the mother wound and, explaining it in a lot of detail. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
This podcast represents the opinions of our hosts and their guest speakers. Views and opinions expressed in the podcast are our own and do not represent that of our places of work. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and content here should not be taken as medical or professional advice. Please consult your healthcare professional for any personal recommendations and medical care. While we make every effort to ensure that the information we are sharing is accurate based on the best available information at the time of recording, we welcome any comments, suggestions or feedback via our website contact form, home.com.au/contact. Names and details of personal experiences may have been changed to allow for anonymity and privacy. To join the conversation, join us on social media at Home Postpartum.